Listen, pro tip: you got to hit the record button twice. We're here with Crispy and Crispy's over there, and I'm over here. I'm the second best role player ever. That's the best role player ever, right there.
Don't sell yourself short. Come on now. Come on.
I'm getting it. I'm taking notes. I'm watching your actual plays.
One of these things is not like the other, and one of these things knows how to make shorts, and I don't.
Hey, I got to learn how to role play, though, man. You're the best.
Oh, no. Nonsense.
Yes, sir.
You're making me blush. And with my forehead, that might give someone, suntan or something.
You might blind somebody, man.
I could blind something with this. So we were talking today. We were talking before, we were having a great conversation, just that'll never be seen by anyone. Yep. Oh, there we go. Get the pit vipers on. Now we're ready to go. So Big Bad here has a I don't know, would you call it a rubric, a scale? I guess it was a labeling of sorts.
Yeah.
When we all started in the hobby, we're really kind of 1D players. We're brand new. We're beginners. We all go through this, and this is fine. It's no judgment. When you're starting off, you don't know the rules. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what this thing is all about. You got to ask questions. Totally forgivable. That's just normal, right?
That's normal. That's how you start.
That's how you start. It's how every one of us starts this way. I remember the first time I played, I had no idea. I was playing with a friend, just the two of us. We had no idea what was going on. Didn't understand the rules. We were just young, and it didn't really work. But we're like, there seems like there's something here, but we don't know how to do it.
Just having fun, though.
And so we were just having fun. We were just imagining something, and away it went. But
then you become a 2D player,
and then you get into the 2D. Now, that's where most of us are. Most of us are 2D players. Most of us. What we mean by that? Well, I guess you should. What do we mean by 2D player? What are you talking about?
I mean, it's honestly just people that ask for permission to do stuff constantly, and they ask out of character questions like, oh, can my character do that? Can my character do this? And it's
can I?
Or I want to do this. Well, just do it. Just do the thing. You want to run over there? Run over there. Don't ask me if you can do that.
Where would you put those that they just really want to display their knowledge of the mechanics? Like, is that a 2D thing? Is that a 3D thing? Like, I'm doing this. From my swift action, I'm doing this, and then as immediate, I'm doing that, and then it's where is that? Where does that kind of fit? Because I feel like most of us eventually get to that point where, like, look, I understand the mechanics. I'm going to tell you what my bonus action is. I'm going to tell you what my move action is.
Well, that's a 3D role player because they know the rules. You know the rules. You don't got to ask all the questions. You just
so there's a distinction there, isn't there? Because when we're 2D players. That's what, and again, it's most of us. Yeah. We're more pedestrian when it comes to it. We haven't really spent the time to learn the system. We haven't read the manual. What do you say? You got to read the freaking manual.
You got to read the fucking manual. You got to read the fucking book.
So if you got to read the manual, you've got to understand the mechanic. You can get into it. That seems like the keener at the table. Most of us when we show up, we're like, hey, this seems like fun, whatever. That we're a little more touristy when it comes to participating in the hobby.
See, everybody says the GM has to know the rules. The player has to know the rules too. Otherwise, they're stuck at this lower tier of play because we'll never. I had a friend that refused to read the book and was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and well, you can't.
It's not within the scope of what this game allows. Exactly. Like you have to understand so that you can operate within the scope. It's also very limiting if you're going to outsource all of your knowledge of the game to someone else. Then you're relying on them to know everything. What if they don't know everything? What if there was some other options, but the game master just didn't have time? Like the referee didn't have time to read that chapter, or he forgot. Yeah. I mean, I've got probably 3 or 4 game systems just running through my head constantly because I get wanderlust. As soon as I'm in a system for long enough, I'm like, okay, it's time to change. I'm going to do something different.
That's how I feel.
And so like you're in it, it's fun, it's great, but now I want to go to something else. So I'm already reading the next manual. And that can be a bit of a problem, I'm sure, for players, but especially for players that aren't going to take the time to read the manual to understand the system. And unfortunately, that's where most of us are because it's just too easy. Well, what do I have to worry about? I'll just show up. Crispy knows the answer. I'll just ask him. And I know if he doesn't know the answer, what are you going to do? If a player asks you something you don't know the answer, what are you going to do? You're just going to make it up.
You're going to make it up.
And so, he's just going to make it up anyway.
Roll the D20.
Yeah. I would just say roll, or rocks fall, you die.
There you go.
Rocks fall, you die.
Cast lightning while your character dies because you didn't read the fucking book.
Well, you got to read it. You got to read. There's no way around it. I mean, how would you play chess with someone who hasn't bothered to learn what the moves are?
Exactly.
Like what the various pieces on the board.
Plus, it shows interest. If you come once, you come twice, you better have read the book, because obviously you're not interested if you're not reading the book. I mean,
well, and usually when we say read the book, as the guy running the game, and I tell a player to read the book, I'm not talking about reading it cover to cover. That would be nice, but usually what I'm talking about is I want you to know those portions of the game that are essential for a player to know. And what would those be? Well, you're gonna have to know.
Well, here's the thing: if you don't know the rules for your character, you won't be able to roleplay. That's what happened to me in my first D&D campaign online. So I didn't really know the rules, so I couldn't roleplay, because like when it was my turn, I was like, well, here's a big block of text I have to memorize in 10 seconds. It's impossible. Yeah. I can't just say can't be like, oh, I want to reach back and a lightning bolt forms in my hand, do some cool sound.
Great point.
And it does
great point.
Damage.
Yeah, if you want to move more to a cinematic play, and that is your goal, is that cinematic experience where you have that great imagery and you can, like you just did, you describe what your character can do, some crazy, amazing thing that your character can do. If you don't have the first inkling of what that is, then how are you going to bring that commentary in? How are you going to describe that other than I swing sword at X, I cast this, I cast that? That to me is a very superficial layer. So if you're just constantly going around saying I cure light, cure light wounds, magic missile.
Yep.
If you're doing that all the time, and please don't get me wrong, I don't think there's a problem from time to time to say that you did this, shield of faith, whatever it is that you're doing, or fireball. But it's how much more immersive is it for you to describe, I open my hand, a bead of fire appears, and I throw it with my mind until it explodes into a big. Now, I understand there's a pacing issue. If you get too verbose and you slow things down, then it's like, oh man, every time you just here comes
the 8-minute long paragraph of fireball description.
Every time we know what you're doing, you're just casting light. You really have to you don't, and so there is a balance here. But the point isn't so much the color text or what have you. The point is that you don't even unlock those the potential for doing that if you haven't read the book. If you haven't read,
I mean, here's if you don't read the book, this is what you do. What can I do? Cast fireball.
Yeah.
How much damage does it do? I don't know. What's the dex save?
Yeah.
I don't know. What's the dex save?
What do I roll for that? What?
I cast fireball. I cast guiding bolt.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's frustrating. Doing? It's frustrating for everyone at the table. It's definitely frustrating for the guy that's
frustrating for me, because I want to role play. I don't want to just play the game. I actually want to role play.
Exactly.
And I want to hear cool descriptions.
So we've been dancing around the issue, but what we're really trying to get at here is we want to go to the 3D role playing and what we mean by that. So this is where, like you were alluding to, I'm not asking out of character questions anymore. We're just not into it. We don't need to.
You don't ask. You just do stuff. You don't ask the GM if you can do this or that. You just do it, and the GM will tell you what dice to roll, or tell you the consequences of your actions. You don't say, "Oh, can I fire that over there?" I don't know. You could have, but now you took too long, and now you're not doing anything. You get skipped. You're thinking about doing it.
Yeah, if you're just standing around. Well, I wonder if. Well, are you just thinking these things, or are you going to do them?
Just do it. You reach back with your bow and loose an arrow. Just do it.
It takes a degree of trust, I think, to get to this point where you're no longer just checking with the GM as a rules arbiter. You have that trust that the game master is going to allow you that freedom and trusts you that you're not going to abuse it, and you trust that you're not going to go over the line where you're trying to win the game with the magic thing that, by the way, it happened to be there just when I needed it. That kind of nonsense. You have to have that trust. I
100% agree. But it's if you say, "Hey, Jim, can I jump over this chasm here?" and he says, "No," there's no mystery there. You just go try it. Go try it. I mean, obviously, you want to get some context. Like, I look over the cliff to see how wide this chasm is, and if he describes it's, as wide as a dragon's fucking body.
Well, yeah,
and drop across it.
Well, that's right. And what I've been trying to do, and this is just an experiment, but what I've been trying to do is I encourage more of this less direct questions to me, especially out of character questions, is that I may have an NPC nearby, and the NPC would just turn. You're not going to try to jump that, are you? You crazy?
That's cool. I like that.
That where you're indirectly, it's not. You're indirectly giving the difficulty class of that task, but you're not just coming out and say that's an impossible task.
I agree with that, but I want to have enough players where that's not necessary.
Yeah,
I understand.
See, that's what I prefer. Yeah. Exactly.
Because my character will think about like, oh man, this chasm, it looks pretty wide. I don't know if I could jump this. What do you guys think? And then the GM could,
or another player. Like if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that another player should be able to jump into that conversation. I'm like, maybe you could do this. I saw you jump over that roof. Remember last month we were getting chased on the rooftops and you jumped between that alleyway. It looks about the same distance.
Exactly.
And then having a game master willing to let things like that. Of course, they're going to set the difficulty class, and they don't have to. I don't.
Yeah, they can set the difficulty class using roleplay by how wide. Is there wind?
That's right.
Flying by. You obviously know there's wind going by. That's going to be really hard. Is it going with me? Is it going against me? If it's going with you, probably easier.
Yeah.
Is it like so far down that you'll die? You look down.
You look way down. You see the body of some coyote that's down there laying in a crater, the shape of his body.
Exactly.
What is this?
What if you have? I mean, just think about this scenario, man. There's 20 orcs and goblins chasing you, and you and your buddy are running across a field, an open field out of the forest. There's a chasm in front of you. Are you going to stop and ruin if you ask the GM, can I jump across this? Is it too far for me to jump? The immersion is totally ruined. There's got to be something where it just goes. Yeah.
It breaks the tension that you've built up with the time pressure. You're being chased. Exactly. They're gaining on you. They're gaining on you. And now there's an obstacle in front. So if you stop and say, well, what are the rules if I'm running and then I take a running jump? How do I calculate I'm not interested in that.
5-minute rule discussion. I'm already, it lost because you'll feel tension. You'll feel like real life tension and anxiety. Like, fuck, I'm running. I got to make a decision.
Yeah. You should feel that.
5-minute rule discussion.
And I want that. I want those emotions running high in the player. Like exactly. I want the emotion level there really high.
You want the emo haircut. Long and black. Okay.
So yeah, it's a different style of play. It's fairly unusual. When you see it, you say there's something different here. You had mentioned in our conversation earlier, we were talking about watching some games that have been broadcast where players are doing more of this than not, and they watched what was it? It was
Table Story.
Table Story.
But I wouldn't even say I wouldn't go that far. I would just say the players are like on the verge of it, but not the GM. Yeah, the GM kind of like it's a weird dynamic. The players are really good, but it's like the GM could use some more.
Yeah, that's unusual. I would say from games. I don't watch a lot of games, but the games that I have watched, the main culprits for breaking immersion is the character or the player that's just sitting there and saying, can I see this? What's there? What is that? When I look around, what can I see over here? What did they have? Like what's my favorite one?
Yeah, I had
how does the door hinge? Does it hinge?
I had a player kicked out of it. I had a player kicked out of a Jaguars game. I wasn't having it. I was like, I'm not coming back to this. He's like, here. You remember that? I don't know if you guys heard
do remember there was one in particular where you could tell the contrast between these different styles of play becomes very stark when you have most people on the same page and then one outlier. And if that outlier is just sitting there when it's their turn, what about this? What about that? Or what kind of thing? What do I think about this? And what do I know about that? And it's it just derails the whole session. It stands out. It stands out.
1D new players, 2D players that are enjoying it, asking minimal questions. 3D, do we get there?
Yeah.
3D is okay. We got there.
3D is the rules. So everyone knows the rules. The mechanics are known to a level where they can fade into the background. They're not disappearing. They're still there. They're like the foundation upon which other things are built. Right. So you have to, and we were talking about how it's so important to read the book so that you have an idea of what the scope of what you could reasonably attempt in this particular game that we're playing.
And now we have 4D players, the pinnacle, which I don't think. I think you're close. I think you're close, dude. I think you're close.
Well, this is my goal. I think it's a little harder to define this one, but I suppose we could break it down into various components. First thing that a 4D player is doing is they're creating characters not based on builds. They're creating characters based on believability within the world. Exactly. And there's a big difference between that. So they're not Then when that player interacts with the world, they're not thinking of optimizing constantly. Like every character they build is an inherent and genius tactician. They're playing with the limitations that they put on themselves. You know what I'm saying?
If you're an Optimancer, you're playing role-playing games wrong. I'm sorry, you're playing them wrong. You're making optimized character builds. It's boring. What are you doing?
It's boring, and I'm not suggesting that you don't optimize one or two things. Like you say, I'm really good at this. I'm the wheelman. Yeah. Let's say that. So I've optimized my driving skills for this character.
Yep.
But I will also suggest that a 4D player is also going to look for an interesting foible, an interesting drawback, a hindrance for that particular character as well. So he's not just I'm wonderful at everything. No, he's good. He has a specialization, or she has a specialization, and then she has some weaknesses.
Specialization is a good word. Your character should be specialized in something.
Well, I think it's important, especially because this is a cooperative game. So if you're specialized, you're trying to look for specializations that will complement what the other players are doing and what they would find interesting. But you're not trying to make just a bunch of Ubermen that have no weakness whatsoever, because that becomes a little dull. It's more interesting to have some drawbacks.
If you're making character builds, what if you never level up? What if your character dies and you're gonna play the same character build next time? And then your characters should all be believable. You know,
I think that's so category. So maybe if we could do it this way. Okay. One, you're building believable characters within the setting that you're playing.
Yes.
Not just builds. Not you're doing your believable living type.
It would make sense for that character to live in that world.
Yeah, exactly. That it's not so out there. So your character makes sense.
You're not, you don't have a peasant cannon. You're not a coffee warlock, whatever you could drink.
Like it has to make sense. It has to make sense in the setting. Now there's different settings. So that's going to be a discussion that you have with the group on what type of game are you running? Is it going to be more of a slapstick humor, or is it more like Sopranos? Like, so are you doing, what is that? Chips or something? California Highway Patrol? Are you doing something like that? Are you doing like Hot Fuzz? Is it a gritty type police drama? It's more like NYPD Blue. It's less like
dope gritty idea.
What is that other one? Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So that's setting specific. So Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Yeah, it's a cop drama. NYPD Blue, if that's an old one, but that's a cop drama.
Ever see The Good Guys? We're not going to go off rails. We're not going to go off rails here.
No. So okay, then the next step. Alert. Yes, go ahead.
D&D, super gritty, coming in the future, probably next year. I got to get everyone on board. No one wants to play D&D 5e anymore.
It's true. It's
going to happen though. It's going to happen.
And maybe that's a tangent. Maybe if we get to it, we can talk a little bit about why I think 5e isn't necessarily the best, in my opinion.
Sucks by Crispy.
Yeah, I won't go so far as to say it sucks. It's hard to say that something as popular as 5e sucks, but I do think that there's components to that game that make it harder to get to this 3D and 4D level. Now, not impossible, because I know we have a difference of opinion on this, but I would say it takes a lot more heavy lifting to get there. But let's set that to the side. The next component. So we've already got this kind of character component. The next one is your behavior at the table changes.
Yes.
You just do not have out of character. Talking.
Unless like you're like a pro player and you come in, you're like, well, I actually don't know this little. I remember I asked one question in someone's game because I just didn't know. I never played the game system before. They just like, hey, come in. I was like, okay. but it's minimal. It's almost, it should be 0. It should be 0, but sometimes you got to ask one question.
Well, sometimes you have to. It's true. And I'm not suggesting that you never have to, you never ask. I'm not sure what there are times where you have to call a timeout, so to speak. And hopefully it's not in a really dramatic time. Because if it's in a dramatic moment or a high tension moment, you had given the example of getting chased towards the chasm by a bloodthirsty band of orcs. Now is not the time. Yeah.
I rolled a nat 20. I was like, do I do double damage? I was like, I don't do double damage. Like, oh. Sorry. I guess I should have read your homebrew rules.
Yeah, well, that's where homebrew becomes a bit of a problem, doesn't it? Because especially if you have someone just coming new into your game. Now, I am guilty of extensive homebrew, but I'm trying to move away from it. It's better to just say, look, we don't use that particular rule. Then we have this whole other sheet of rules that we go over. Like a few little things, like your homebrew when we did our Palladium Fantasy First Edition. That was really manageable. It wasn't.
It wasn't too much.
It was like 3 or 4 things. That was it. It was easy.
To me, like that goes again with like 40. Like to me, those things made sense in the world. Like, why didn't they include them in the first place?
That's right. Yeah. Well, and that's why I think it makes sense to the set. What is it called? Rule 0. I'm not going to rail against Rule 0. I think it's necessary. It's been a part of the hobby since the inception. But I would say that it does. If you're going to have a lot of departures from the rules as written, then you're also inviting more out of character questions, because now if you're encouraging your players to read the book, but then you're not using the book, then they're going to have to ask questions to clarify what's going on.
That's
true.
I
can't remember. Do we do this? Does this stack with that?
But no. When we get the 40 playing and role playing, the game master and the player should both be on this extra planar sphere of role playing.
Well, and that's the next step.
Dimension.
You're absolutely right. I think the next step is you're trying to play the character as if the world in which they inhabit is real.
Yes, absolutely.
You're pretending 100%. It's real, and you're giving and I think that's a great display of trust in your game master. You're saying, I believe this world could exist in my imagination. It's going, and now obviously it doesn't. It's all still make believe, but you're prepared to say that this is. I'm going to pretend for this 2 hours or whatever that this is real and I'm in it.
That's why RPGsDom is still, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best game masters. Everything absolutely I did,
phenomenal.
I had full trust that if I did something, I did something as my big giant thud character. I was like, I'm being silent, hiding up against the wall. His guy just walked in, because realistically, a guy would walk in if he didn't hear any noise all of a sudden, and I just hammered him, with another body or something. It was gruesome. It was brutal.
See, that's great. That's excellent. That's excellent. And that puts a lot of responsibility on the game master too. If you want your players to be that kind of immersed in the world, you have to make sure you're not doing things to make the world more difficult to believe. So you have to have, the world has to be internally consistent. If it does this, then it should always do this, unless there's some major, an obvious reason why it doesn't. And then it's a big reveal. Oh, it didn't work that way this time. Why? There's something wrong. But it puts a lot of pressure on game masters to be consistent. But I think that's part of the mantle of being the game master. That's just what you have to do. It's harder to do.
Very true.
It's harder to do.
I think once you get to this level, you should be describing your actions and how your character feels, and the surroundings too, perhaps.
Well, I think so. And I think that that's a good summary, because it provides a definition that we can work with when we're talking about actual role playing. What are you doing? You're describing where you are in the world. So physically where you are in the world and what you're doing. You're describing your actions. And then you're just thinking that way. You're not putting any kind of filter between me, the player, and the character sheet. I am that character.
You are that character.
I am that character.
At the table, that you're not crispy. You're
that's right. And so I'm working on this, because you pointed out something to me, and I think it was very valid criticism. You said, I noticed with your characters, you always try to play this really confident, almost cocky character. And I went back after you said that to me, and I appreciate that feedback, because I went back and I looked at some of my actual plays. And sure enough, I'm like, wow, I'm always playing this like really cocksure, like I know what I'm doing, whatever.
And now you have to make up. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that is a problem, because that's not a 4D player. A 4D player is able to take their own personality and separate that completely from what the character is. Your character is not you. You should be able to separate your own mannerisms and to a certain degree not have those anymore. So my next challenge for myself is, the next time I'm invited to play in a game, I don't want to be just Barris again, reskinned, or any of the characters that I played, which I enjoyed those characters, but I don't want to just reskin that all the time.
Once I was like, you should embrace, him being fat. I feel like you really embrace that. Like that makes the character for me, dude, watching him play like that.
That's right. So it's one of those, that's a challenge. And that's why I'd say not there yet, but I'm actually working towards it.
Not to interrupt you. Is it a challenge to play Barris? I think that's like, I actually really like watching you play Barris. I thought that was really cool.
What I find challenging with Barris is the language aspect. If you watch me play, I'm constantly trying to be the religious zealot in the group, right? So you'll notice that I didn't
feel that at all.
I'm very seldom do I call the other players by their first name. It's always brother this and brother that, and brother elf and sister this, and I'm trying to make this, trying to create in everyone else's mind this guy that's super pious, and when we have debates, because we'll have debates with Bernier, that's Max's character.
Now, are you trying to do that sneakily, convert everybody, or is it?
Well, no, I think I'm not trying to be too sneaky about it,
because I didn't pick up on that at all. I just like,
that means I need to amp it up. I'm being too subtle then.
Yeah, too subtle. Yeah,
you'll hear it sometimes, and maybe this is too subtle, but I'll say things like, this is a chance for us to do a higher, a higher calling. We're called to sacrifice, not just for filthy lucre, not just for the gold pieces, not just for the fame. Think of the wonderful things we'll do for the people that'll benefit from the fact that we've destroyed this evil in the land. Think of the homesteads that could be created here, and the farms and the.
See, I wasn't sold until someone mentioned something about owning a town. Maybe I came up with it. I don't know. Someone came up with that idea, and I was like,
there you go. There you go.
Yeah, now I need a priest. Now I need a peony. Now I need you. You know what I'm saying?
So it's that kind of immersion that's hard. It's elusive to. I find elusive to get yet, or at this point, but it's worth working towards, I think.
Yeah,
it's a challenge, but it's a worthy
challenge. Watch Christy and take notes for sure.
Well,
because I'm doing it.
You can watch me play. You'll see my mistakes, and you can note those down. When I watch it again, I rewatch them, which is a special kind of torment for yourself to watch yourself. It's hard enough to watch yourself on camera, but then to watch yourself play a geeky, cheesy game, and then you're the one that's trying to be the cheesiest. It is kind of cringe,
but you got to break the cringe barrier.
You got to just break the cringe barrier. We were talking about this earlier. You just got to push through that. It's going to be uncomfortable. Just go right through it. Just, you know what? I don't care if you think my accent is cringy. I'm just going with it. And
when I did the Scarecrow voice, I was like, I got to do it.
Just do it. Just do it. And it is, it is kind of cringy, but only until you're joined by someone else. And as soon as someone else, at the table says, "Oh, it's okay to maybe I'm gonna I don't do the voices.
It's okay to have fun. But it's okay to have fun.
It's okay it's okay to push this. It's okay to be. I would describe it as being serious.
It's okay to have fun. Arrest this motherfucker right now.
I see the black helicopters are on their way. But I do think it's important to be serious about it. So. We're all there for the enjoyment of the hobby, but I do think that if you're sincere about it and you're going to take it serious in the fact that you're not there just as I don't know. I guess the best way I would think of to say it, I'm having a hard time getting my words out. But what I would say is that it's probably the difference between someone who's willing to kind of move there versus someone that's just visiting. Like, I'm not just visiting. My wife asked me one time, she's like, what do you see yourself doing in retirement? Because a lot of my peers that are, they'll go golfing, whatever it is. Like, what are you going to do in retirement? I'm like, I'm going to play role-playing games in my retirement. She's like, really? You still think you're going to do that? I'm like, absolutely.
Why not?
I'm not a tourist. I'm I'm here for the long haul.
I wish I discovered tabletops a long time ago because I was doing the chat role playing. It's like real time. It's whatever, but tabletop's so much more fun because you have rules and no arguments. It's
it's even. I agree with you, and I think it's even more fun when we use it to the utmost of what it's capable of producing.
Yeah.
And what too many of us have fall into from time to time, especially at that 2D level, where so many of us plateau, you're really just playing a video game. And
that's what it is. You're playing a video game, and it's like
you're probably better to just bite the bullet.
Hot take: Baldur's Gate was a terrible game. And if you like Baldur's Gate, you're probably a 2D player.
You may be. I don't know. I don't play.
I played it. I streamed it 3 days, and I was like, you know what? I hate playing this. It's not fun. I want to use my mind. You don't use your mind in these games. It's like playing Monopoly online. You hit a button, and eventually someone wins or loses.
And I feel that way. I feel that way about out of character questions. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's just hitting the button again and again and again and again, spamming that to try to get the cursor over the one brick that is going to have the pop-up, whatever. And to me, it seems like you're not tapping into the potential of what the hobby can offer. Yeah. Instead, you're just, especially with the advent of VTTs, and now it looks as though that's the way the behemoth in the hobby. It looks like Wizards of the Coast is going that way. I think they're pushing more into a digital experience. They moving away from physical media, from what I can understand.
A terrible mistake on their part.
And I think that's I agree with you. I think it is a mistake because it leaves on the table all of the richness that's possible when you're not limited to coding. And that's you're always going to be limited.
We don't use any of that in our games. We use the digital dice, which is like, I think that's it's fun, but that's for the audience to be like, oh, he rolled 18. I don't know. Does he need
that's a spectator thing. That's not for me. It's not for you. It's for those that are watching to see it. I mean, I feel
like that's all you need, though. You know.
Really, I think you're right. And I wish I had known that before I had piled an unholy amount of money into Fantasy Grounds. But
you did the thing. I almost did it.
Oh, I went, well, at the time it was 2020 and we were just desperate to have a game of any kind. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I need a VTT if we're going to play at all. And so that's when I did it. But now when I look back at it, you really don't need that. No. If you're going to go into 3D, 4D type play, I don't think it's needed.
People have been coerced that they need it, just like they've been coerced to ask the GM questions. Because that's all they ever see online. In every actual play, they're asking GM questions, or the GM's telling them no, or blah blah. That's not how you play. You got to watch. You got to watch our games.
Well, I think it's a really interesting thought experiment to say this scene that I just watched, and all it was 4 players taking turns asking questions. How could you do that? How could you do that same scene with 0 questions? What would be required?
Exactly.
Just as a thought experiment, how could you do that?
Then
experiment with doing that, because you'll find is that there's just a totally different experience than what you were having before. Yeah, and it's better for your game master too. Think about running a game where your players aren't just constantly bombarding you with questions. What about this? Or what about that? And what about what are the ceilings like? And what's the come on?
One of my best sessions is with 28mm RPG. He doesn't even have it up on his channel. I don't know why. I don't even think we fought or did anything. We literally traveled from one town to the other, and we were just describing what we're doing on this bandwagon. And my character was just on top of a caravan, just doing tricks with my sword and, trying to show off to the kids so that they would remember my name. And it was like, imagine a caravan going through a rustic village, and you just see this crazy half elf just dancing around, trying to show off to children about his cool magic tricks and his sword flips and stuff because he's trying to get his name out there. It's just, that went on for like an hour, and that was one of the best sessions. I think Bernay was in the back falling asleep, and some girl she got kidnapped. I'm pretty sure she got kidnapped or ate or something. I don't really remember, but it was it's fun. I like things like that because you're creating scenes.
Yeah. Well, if I could, and I'm always a little reticent to share. Oh, I'm sorry. We're probably going over time.
No. That's my timer. I've had to turn it off.
So I'm a little reticent. I was going to say to share what happened in a game, because that can become really boring to people listening to this. But let me just give a very brief example of what we're talking about. I have a player in my in-person game on Tuesday nights, and we were playing this survival scenario. Spaceship crashes on an unknown planet, and why did it crash? And there's some survivors, and there's strange flora and fauna on this planet. And he created, get this is a sign of someone moving into that 3D, 4D space. His character that he created, he wanted to be a survivalist, but he's not actually a survivalist. He's just a social media influencer that's pretending to be a survivalist.
That's cool.
So when he's describing his actions, the first thing he says is, I pull out my video camera and I make sure that I'm in the shot, and then I go around. And so he's doing that. And it just became hysterical because he's playing this. Now, he didn't tell anyone that what he pretended to have survival skills. He was just pretending. Now, I could tell because I could see what he was rolling.
Yeah.
Because he's rolling this. I'm like, wait a second. If he had specialized in survival, there's no way he'd be rolling those dice. So he's just a pretender, right? But he's pretending through the whole session.
That's awesome.
And then he's got this. And so this is someone that has gone from a 2D player, which they would just normally, very little immersion, just read off the character sheet, play bingo on the character sheet, and then ask me questions constantly. What about this? What about that? What about that? Yeah. Not doing that at all. Not doing that at all. And that's a awesome, very interesting development. So
it's
that's
great to see it. It's great to see it.
It's good to see it. I find it incredibly rewarding to have a player move to that level where and they tell me afterward, I'm getting way more from this game than I did before. I'm getting way more. I'm having way more fun than I had before.
People just not want to do that, or they just don't know how to do that. I
think that's a combination of those. I think it's a combination. It's not something they've seen a lot, so perhaps it feels a little foreign.
I mean, true. Like, people recommend me games. They're like, "Oh, this is good," and it's like, I'm not gonna name it. I'm not gonna name any names because. But it's like,
and you know what?
That
on a
was
2D
good
level,
roleplay,
it might be the pinnacle of 2D. Like, it might be, this is a great 2D game.
On a 2D level, but then you watch and you're like, nothing's happening. The scene is like changing, and it's like, what? You can't just go from a red car to a blue car without explaining how.
Wait a sec, where are you?
Who's there? Paint the car? Like, how did you get there? What's going on? Like,
yeah,
I listened. Right now.
I watched a video just to illustrate what you're talking about. I watched a video recently, and it was a bunch of game masters talking about what they're doing, and one of these advice videos, which I hope maybe this is one of them. But the comment was made. Well, I like to have if the players don't have a healer or something, then I'll just have a healer with them, and then one of the game masters said, and I think she said this. I'll paraphrase her a little bit. She said that, well, it's totally fine when everyone forgets that they're there, and then they'll say, well, what about this? And then I just remember, oh yeah, they were there too, but they're just in the background. And like, that's terrible advice. That's not a believable world. Like, you just have a crowd that just follows you around like a little entourage.
Anytime you need them,
and then when you just need them, you just you call them in, like they tag in from the side of the ring. Here you go.
Tag me in, bro. I'm gonna heal you.
They don't have any of their own motivations. No, they're just a heal bot. They're like, you should do that. You should. No. Game masters, you should have a heal bot with every party, just in case
Don't expect to get healed, friend.
No, I'm like, no, you should just kill more of your characters, and then they'll play different.
A 40 player would know there's no healer and not take as many risks.
Well, that's right. Or they'll accept their mortality.
Exactly.
The character just knows, okay, this is it for me.
Like, there was no healer in our games, our Castle and Crusades games, but I'm still doing heroics. The third game, or before you got in there, I was trying to fly on griffins and do such heroic activities that my character would be famous throughout the land. No healers around.
No.
So be heroic.
Well, it's because again, we're coming back to these definitions that we've arbitrarily put on this, and I want to be clear. I fall into 2D all the time. I'm trying to be more of a 3D player, but there's where's I going with that? So there is a big difference of understanding the mechanics and then just playing the mechanics versus playing the character. And I think that what we're trying to get at is play the character, play the character's personality, play the character's motivations, goals, ambitions. The mechanics should be there. Just they're just under. They just simmer just right underneath the surface.
It's so easy. Here's a little quick pro tip. Play your character stats. You roll a bad stat, that's one of your traits in your character now.
Roll with it. Yeah, go with it.
So easy. You don't even have to come up with your own quirks. They're built into your character. You roll the.
I agree completely, and that's why it's important.
Strength, guess what? You got little shrimpy muscles. You know, you can't lift nothing. And you say that when you, I heave up my warhammer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know.
That's right. It's like always. And
easy.
It's not difficult to do, but to do it consistently takes real effort until it becomes second nature.
I'm not there at all yet, but I want to be. I want to be. That's the difference. That's the difference.
You patted my ego a lot. I'm not there yet. I do think that it's possible to get there. I think that those that really want to get more out of their game, that are willing to push beyond that cringe layer, which let's face it, you're already in the cringe. Just embrace it.
Embrace it. You're already here.
Just embrace it. You're playing Dungeons and Dragons as a grown man. Like embrace that.
Listen, no one's gonna think you're cool by not doing cringe. The only way to be cool playing Dungeons and Dragons is to be the cringiest fuck possible. That's the truth.
Yeah, I think so. I think those that really want to get into it, they're going to get more out of it, and I don't think they care so much that someone else is like, oh, well, that's kind of stupid. All you have to do is just say this and then plus this. I rolled a this.
That's so lame. I've already committed to like just leaving tables that are like that. Like, I'm out of here, not doing it. You know.
Yeah, and I don't want to run tables like that either. I want to run tables where the 1D player can come in and within a very short period of time can just skip the 2D completely. Yeah. Just go right to 3D. Just go right there. As soon as we teach you the mechanic, you can go right. You don't have to. You don't have to be trained. You don't have to train yourself to ask the game master just an endless string of questions. You do not have to do that. That is not a required step.
You do whatever you want. That's the trick. You just do whatever you want. Who cares what the game master is going to say? Because you're going to do whatever you want to do.
Well, and if you're really back to that 4D where we had said one of the things is that you're trying to play that character as if they live in an actual world, a real imaginary world. I know that's a bit of an oxymoron, but if you think of it that way, then it's not that difficult to imagine what's in the world. If you're there immersed in the world, then you can see what's there in your mind. You can use that, and a good game master will work with you on that. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get your way all the time. It just means that you're not asking them out of character questions. You don't have to.
With 4D players requires a 4D GM, which plays off each other. Like I said, you're running through the forest, out into the open field. A chasm is slowly opening up as you approach, and you have to jump across. The GM will tell you, as you approach, the chasm seems to open up endlessly. And there's nowhere for you to, there's no way to cross. He'll tell you these things, but through the immersive world.
Well, his description or her description should be detailed enough without being overbearing that you can quickly picture it. You don't have to have the exact same picture in your head. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. That's something I've learned. I didn't expect that. That was a bit of a surprise when we learned that in our game. Because afterwards we talk about it. Well, how did you imagine this? Well, I imagined it this way. Well, how did you imagine it? I imagined it completely different another way. But that's okay. It still was coherent. Everyone could still play together. There wasn't a problem.
I tell people that all the time. Less is more. It doesn't matter how you describe something. Because I'm imagining it different than you are going to imagine. And it's just how it works. You
do touch on a good point here in that. What is the limiting factor? Is it and I think that there's a limiting factor. The person running the game, and what we're talking about is players should take more ownership in running the game. Yeah. But there is a limiting factor. If your game master is a 2D game master, it's going to be hard for you to move beyond that.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they're going to do the things. They're going to model the things that you're trying to avoid. And because they're doing it, everyone else is doing it. It's just too easy to fall back into that.
And you don't know any better. I mean, essentially, I can't really fault people for being 2D because they don't know any better. No, and the GMs don't know any better.
They don't. But they for those of us that attempt to GM, and it certainly is more of an art than a science.
True.
You are the limiting factor. If you want your players to be more, less out of character talk and all of that, you have to limit out of character talk from yourself.
True.
Otherwise, you're setting a standard, or you're trying to hold players to a standard that you are unwilling to accept for yourself.
Yeah, like I said, you gotta watch Table Story, because you're like, wow, this is really good, and then the conversations about a character question start, and it's like, wow, I thought this was like a high budget production, and it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it starts here, and then it goes down.
Yep.
I love watching it anyways, though. I watch actual plays I want to learn. I want to be a better role player. You know what I'm saying?
I like to watch them in that I see a lot of my own habits in them, and then I can identify. Yes, I am guilty of watching them with a somewhat of a critical eye, but I watch myself that way too. So it's not. I'm not being inconsistent.
Here's where you're the best at: slow burn role play. Do you know what that is? You know what I mean by that?
No, you better describe that for me. What do you mean by slow burn?
It's like when you walk outside, you'll describe yourself how you walk out the door and exit and all these different things. That's slow burn. Like, it's not necessary, but that's really good though. It's really good to do that though.
See, I think that's possible with just some minor adjustments. So for example, if you're having a conversation back and forth with an NPC, the party is talking to an NPC, and the conversation's kind of going okay, not great. Just describing, my hand drops to the pommel of my sword, and I just kind of wiggle so as I say, so I say this, and then my hand drops to my sword. So just by doing a little thing like that, you're changing by describing your actions of your character a little bit. Then it's like,
you just changed the whole dynamic. Are you getting bored of the conversation, or are you threatening? You know what I'm saying? Like,
and how I do that. So because I'm not going to act out these 4D. Things.
That's 4D.
I have to describe, and again, I understand pacing can be an issue, but you want to add that little bit of a color here and there, right? Yeah. So you're bartering with someone, some market, you're trying to talk them down. You don't just count out the gold coins from the purse. You're like, oh man, you're like everyone, one at a time, dropping them into their hand, and that's it. That's all you get. But it just makes I can understand this character a little better.
That's like 4D though. Imagine you want to buy something from a shopkeep, right, in your game, and you go up to your GM. He's like, it's 25 gold or whatever, some number, and you describe handing over every single gold piece. I guarantee your GM's gonna be like, 5 gold's enough.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're trying to get a discount. You get a discount for role play.
Like, you want 4D? I'm going to beat you over the head with it. But I do think those kind of descriptions, they're really useful. So, like, if I'm playing an archer, or if let's say you're playing an archer of some kind, and I would play up on that. Like, you're leaning over, you have the bow, you're playing with an arrow, you're contemplating something. I even think in combat, little things make a big difference. So instead of just saying I swing, you do this really well, by the way. So instead of saying I just swing my sword, no, I lunge forward with my sword. I point the tip of my sword right at his navel, and I go to disembowel. Yeah. That kind of thing. It can still fail. That's fine. But it gives the game master something to work with too. Because you imagine if you had a player that did that for you. Like I point my pistol right between his eyes, right? And I press the trigger. Okay, well, that's going to give me already some ideas of what if it's a failure, if it's a success, depending on what the dice roll is. I already kind of have some things to work with.
Yep.
And then when you're into 4D, then the players are taking some of that description too. So like that's where, like Rick does this in his 28 millimeter does this, where if you do a death blow, he just says death blow, and then you describe how you describe it.
I like that. I like that.
And that's great. I think
that's
awesome. I think that's an excellent idea.
You bring up a good point though. A lot of people won't describe where they're attacking because that's like a called or aim shot. Who cares if it's a whatever? You're not actually trying to kill him with the head slice. It's a cool description. Like, I'm gonna stick him right to the eye with the pointy end of my sword.
I understand what you're saying, and depending on the system you're playing, that might alter the modifiers on the roll. And that's where I think system mastery is important, because then you can say, well, yeah, no, I'm like back to the archer. The archer's aiming. I'm trying to get right between the the eye slit on this full plate armor guy. I'm trying to hit right between the eyes. That player should understand that the character is doing something that's more difficult.
Exactly. Well, that's when if you know you're a rules master of the game, you'll say something like, "I'm doing an aim shot," and then go into the cool description of aiming between the little slits.
Yeah, and I think you can get to the point exactly where for sometimes when you're doing an aim shot, you don't have to call it an aim shot. Yeah. You just say, "I steady," listening to my heart, timing the release of the bow in between heartbeats. Like I
like that a lot. You gotta have a 4D GM for.
You gotta have a 4D GM that kind of understands what. Okay, I understand the rules.
I've done 1 or 2 like that in the Castle of Crusades game, and I don't think he picked it up because he didn't tell me to roll with negatives, and I didn't put the negatives in there myself, so I don't think he was thinking about it, so I just did it like a normal.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. What I do in my table, my physical table, is I just trust that the players will put their negatives in.
Yeah.
So like if they do something, then I do sometimes review before we start playing. Are there any rules questions? Are there any mechanics you're not clear on that we can clear up before we get started? Because once we get started, I'm going to rely on you to know what the mechanics are. And mistakes do happen, but mistakes happen whether or not we've got our nose in the rule book the whole time too.
Yeah,
like you're still going to have mistakes either way.
You can't be 4D and you're asking the rules. Oh, I think that's a mistake. Who cares a mistake? You fix it.
You move on. We look it up after, and we'll say, oh yeah, we made a mistake here. It should have been this.
Here's something. In I think Abe's game, I never casted Fireball because I just never play Wizards. I don't care. I don't like Magic. I casted Fireball and he said I did double damage. I looked it up later. I rolled 16 damage dice. I was only supposed to roll 8.
Right.
So the next game, I actually looked it up while I was playing. And my very next attack, I didn't do anything because I felt like I had cheated. And so I did something more in character, like, I'm looking around, I observe the battlefield so I can see what's going on. Because I didn't want to take 2 turns right after. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, that shows a mature player. Like a mature player.
I feel like I cheated almost. So I was like, I'm not going to do nothing next turn. And that maybe makes it balance somewhat. I don't know.
We had talked earlier. I don't know if we caught it in the recording or not, but we talked about the importance of having trust. And that's a trust thing. So if you trust that your players are not trying to just pull one over on the game master, like I'm just going to pull a fast one here. Yeah. 16 dice instead of 8.
It's happened in Rick's game too. I was like, I used the wrong attack. So I removed some of my bonuses from a different weapon. So now I have no more bonuses for all my sharpening and stuff I did in prior games. So
it's an integrity thing too. Like
it's integrity. I feel bad, because I want if you're cheating and stuff, your character doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like he exists in that world. You know what I'm saying?
It does. Yeah, I agree. And it does
ruins everything, honestly.
Well, it breaks the believability of the world. And again, 4D is where we're trying to play as if the character actually lives in a real place. Like that really exists and this is a real place.
True.
Yeah.
That's the way to go. I think
we got
I think we wrapped up. You said it. You're playing a real character and he lives in a real world, my friend.
Yeah, it's a real fictional world. And I know that sounds weird, but that's how I try to imagine it when I'm playing these characters.
And that's how you should too. Check out Crispy over at Table Runner.
Yeah, please check me out. Table Runner.
You already know who I am.
Big bad.
Catch you next time.